A first-day rest prepares the worker. A seventh-day rest prepares the work. Today is the spiritual center of this week's podcast series entitled Sleep is the New Leadership Flex. We've talked about sleep. We've talked about burnout this week. But today I want to go deeper than workplace trends, deeper than management books, and deeper than employee surveys, deeper even than recent court cases about social media and children. I want to go back to the beginning because long before our culture started talking about burnout, God had already established a rhythm of work and rest. And I want to put before you the line that has really anchored this whole week for me. A first-day rest prepares the worker. However, a seventh-day rest prepares the work. Welcome to the 10 Commandments of Leadership podcast. That distinction matters. Much of modern culture treats rest as an emergency recovery after damage has already been done. Work hard, push hard, run hard, deplete yourself, then collapse, then recover, then back into the game. But the seventh-day Sabbath points to a different order. Rest is not simply there to rescue a worn-out worker. Rest is built into the architecture of work itself. Rest is part of the design of the work. That means the pause is not an interruption of purpose. The pause is part of the purpose. God did not stumble onto rest. God instituted rest. God sanctified rest. God modeled rest. And that says something profound to every leader, every worker, every family, and yes, every child growing up in a world of constant stimulation. Adults are told to keep producing. Children are being trained to keep scrolling. One form of pressure is overwork. The other is overstimulation, but both violate rhythm. The American Academy of Pediatrics 2026 Digital Policy Guidance advises avoiding screen exposure an hour before bedtime and keeping devices out of bedrooms, precisely because sleep protection matters for children and adolescents. The American Psychological Association likewise says adolescent social media use should be limited when it interferes with sleep. So when I talk about Sabbath, I'm not only talking about worship style, I'm talking about God's wisdom for human flourishing. Sabbath says human beings are not machines. Sabbath says limits are not failure. Sabbath says your worth is not measured by constant, non-stop output. Sabbath says attention is holy enough to guard. Sabbath says work matters, but worship, order and alignment matter too. That is why I keep saying a seventh-day rest prepares the work. Because when work emerges out of order, it tends to be wiser work. When work emerges out of worship, it tends to be humbler work. When work emerges out of rhythm, it tends to be more sustainable work. And I believe this is one of the strongest correctives to egoholism. The inflated ego says everything depends upon me. The deflated ego says I only matter if I keep producing. The Sabbath exposes both of those as lies. The Sabbath says God is God, and you and I are not. The Sabbath says you may be needed, but you are not ultimate. The Sabbath says stop worrying and start trusting. That is a leadership word, because many leaders are not driven only by responsibility. They are driven by fear. Fear of falling behind. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. Fear of not being needed. Fear of losing the edge. And fear creates restless leaders. But Sabbath leadership is different. Sabbath leadership says, I will not let my ambition outgrow God's order. I will not let my task list become my God. I will not let my task list become my God. I will not let my ego turn work into a substitute religion. I will not let endless engagement, whether at the office or on a screen, colonize my soul. That's why this conversation applies equally to the executive as well as to the child. One is in the boardroom. The other is in the bedroom with a cell phone. But both are being taught how to relate to rest. And if we don't teach the next generation that rest is part of wisdom, they will inherit not just our technology, but also our fatigue. So today, I want to leave you with this. Hear me. Rest is not anti-work. Rest prepares better work. And a first-day rest may prepare the worker, but a seventh-day rest prepares the work. That, my friends, is not weakness. That is divine leadership design. Thanks for joining us this afternoon for this episode of the 10 Commandments of Leadership. Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.